Here we go.
Do you want me?
Here we go. You're on it now, Mike, so don't go anywhere. So, welcome to the Friday edition of the Hopkinton Hangout Hour. I'm Jim Cousins, and I'll be hosting this first half hour, and Mike Trojan will be hosting the second half hour. Joining me today, I have Mike, and I have Tom and Bob from the studio who are joining the conversation, and we have John Ritz, who has many hats in the community, one of which is on the board of HCAM. But the one we're talking about today is his interest and involvement in trails and most things outdoors. So, John, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
All right. Now, first tell us what your involvement is. I know you're part of the Trails Club. Is there any other organization that you're part of, or is it that specifically it?
I'll say that's it. That and HCAM, and then various other just things. Hopkinton Community Summer Band, but those are the formal ones I'm involved with.
Okay. What do you do for the Trails Club?
My primary role is I do the outreach. I do the email. I do the Facebook page. I do the Twitter account. If we have something coming up that I need to promote, I'll put word out in various places, things like that. I also lead a lot of the hikes. If people are looking for a place to walk, I'll suggest it and then lead those. I keep calling them hikes. We're trying to get away from the walks. We're trying not to make people think this is arduous stuff that we're doing. These are walks to introduce people to the trail. So yeah, I lead a lot of those.
All right. How long have you been enjoying the great outdoors?
Oh, the great outdoors. Pre Trails Club, that goes back to middle school probably. And before that, I did the Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts things, and my whole family, we were always outdoorsy people, and it was just that time of America when I was one of 5 kids, and first thing in the morning, Mom would kick us out the front door and say, "Be home at dinner time," and that was it. We were expected to take care of ourselves, find places, and mostly what we did was we'd find places outdoors. We'd go out in the woods, we'd find streams to swim in, that sort of thing. So I've always been, and my whole family has been, comfortable outdoors.
And did you grow up around here or somewhere else?
No, I grew up and down the East Coast. I was born in outside Williamsport, Pennsylvania, home of Little League Baseball, though I never played Little League Baseball. Moved from there, for me to keep track of them. Moved from there to New Jersey, from New Jersey to Mansfield, Massachusetts. We were there for 3 years. Mostly I grew up outside of Albany, New York. We moved there in 1967. So most of my life was around the Albany area.
And how long have you been involved with the Hopkinton Trails Club?
Really, just about since it began. It started in 2005. If you're interested in a quick history of it.
I am.
A Hopkinton resident, Lisa Jackson, who HCAM viewers know well, she went to the town. She's a horse rider, and she went to the town and asked who's in charge of the trails, because she wanted to find places to ride her horse and maybe develop new trails, new places to ride. The answer was nobody. There was not a formal group in town responsible for trails. So she suggested maybe the town should have one. The town said, yeah, probably a good idea, but before we do that, let's put together a trail use policy. So they formed a committee to develop this policy, and Lisa was on that committee. But in the meantime, she really wanted to get literally boots on the ground on the trails. So she formed, along with 2 other people, Matt Zedek, former select person, and Beth Rolfs, the 3 of them formed the Hopkinton Trails Club to just go out on a regular basis, walk the trails, show them off to people, and to advocate for new trails. So that was in 2005. And I was present at the first walk they did at College Rock, and I've been with it ever since. I made the mistake at one of the early meetings of saying, hey, we should have a website. So, as anybody who, as Jim knows well from that sort of thing, that made me the webmaster.
Do you still do that now? Is that still part of your
Yeah, I'm
responsibilities?
still maintaining the website and have grand plans to completely revamp it for the mobile version of the world these days. But one of these days we'll get to it.
How big is the club now?
Um, we've got an email list of, I think it's close to 300 people. Um, we recently just changed from a Facebook group, which is a members only, and you have to ask for permission. We switched from that to a Facebook page. Before that, the group had, I think, 260 something members in the group, and we're up to close to that on the page already. But yeah, that and the email us. Our Twitter followers are increasing. For the longest time, it had two of them, and they were both me. So that's improved. I forget how many we've got on Twitter.
So the Trails Club. Now, I assume you go out and you walk on the trails. Is there anything else that you do as a club?
A lot more. We are. Let me back up a little bit and just explain. The Trails Club is not a part of Hopkinton. We are not a town organization. We're just a volunteer group, and we can really barely call ourselves a club. Um, we don't have dues, we don't have committee assignments, and we really don't have formal members. What we have is about 10 people that tend to show up at meetings, tend to help plan the walks or lead the walks, or go into our other role of talking to the government, talking to the town, and saying, we should have a trail here. We see a new development going in here. Could some of that open space that's required around new developments these days have a trail on it? And who can we work with on that? So we do a lot of advocating like that for people. We build trails. The Center Trail, which everybody knows and love, that is a Trails Club effort. We actually built that twice. Lisa Jackson led the first effort, rebuilt it. We had a grand opening, and then we had about 2 years of really horrible weather that washed it, a lot of it out, eroded it. So Peter Lagoy, who's head of the new trail committee in town, he took that on and rebuilt it to what it is today. We've also built the Echo Trail, which is down same railroad bed, and that's down, almost goes down to the Milford bike path and comes up to Granite Street. And the latest one is the Hughes Trail, which is off Hayden Row and going in on the former Hughes property and leading back into the woods.
All right. Well, so now we got kind of an overview of that. Let's talk for a little bit about some of the trails. I would say that in this time where everyone is isolating and they're cooped up in their house, and some people really are asking, can I go outside? Am I worried about that? And actually, on yesterday's show, Tom was talking to um, Sean and the town nurse about that too, and
Yeah.
that is a fine thing to do. Um, when you find that you go out, are you doing anything differently based upon the coronavirus?
Um, Not a little bit. It's the social distancing thing that you want to do. Let me just see if I can do this real quickly. Can I share this picture? No, I want to. No, I don't want to do that. Had a picture that I posted something yesterday. Um, Me standing up holding out a hiking pole in my hand,
Mm-hmm.
and that's effectively about 6 feet. And it's a great way of making sure you're staying away from people.
Oh, yeah.
And I joke that the pointy end of the hiking pole is an effective way of making sure that people respect your distance. So, but yes, you can stay away from groups. The Trails Club actually led a walk last weekend. Yeah, last weekend, and we were concerned about gathering. I think we had about 15 people, but everybody stayed a little ways away from each other. The point Sean made yesterday was that if you and your family go out, you're spending all your time next to each other anyway. You guys don't need to be 6 feet away, but you need to stay away. And just from my walking, I'm finding people are respecting that. People move to the other side of the trail, or they step aside and wait for you to pass. People go over on bridges. What's interesting is that, outdoors, you think there's so much space, no problem with everybody staying away from each other. But because of the need to get out, the cabin fever, I call it, and just need for exercise, the trails and parks have become enormously popular these days. Your guest from the first show, Eric Hardy, sent me an email from last week saying he had driving around town. He noticed that every parking lot for every trailhead was completely packed. And what's happened is that it's almost getting tough to distance. So Mass Audubon has closed all of their sanctuaries. The trustees of reservations has closed. Yellowstone National Park, the Grand Teton National Park, Great Smoky Mountain National Park, all of those have been closed because they were getting just so invaded with people. So yeah, it's a little tough to see that, and you would think that people could still use them, but
Mm-hmm.
but
All
you
right.
can.
So,
The trails in Hopkinton are available.
all right. So, fortunately, you posted that picture publicly. So, I think Mike grabbed
Oh,
that and he's going to share that for us.
okay, he's got it.
Oh,
There,
there it is.
How's that? There you
perfect.
are.
That's how to stay away from people.
And I noticed the point on it. Guess what? I'll stay away from you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what he was saying. That's the business end of the stick.
it's a good thing.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about some of the resources that we have in Hopkinton, some of the trails that you've been on. I assume, I don't know, have you been on every trail in Hopkinton at this point?
I'm gonna say yes, uh, honestly, because I've one of the things that the Trails Club does. We're a resource. We wanted to put as much information out for people as possible of where to go. So one of our early efforts was to create maps of all the trail systems in town. So I literally walked around each trail and mapped it with a personal GPS and created really crude maps of them. So yeah, there's a couple of new systems that the Land Trust has recently opened. There's one of them that I know that I haven't been on, but pretty much every trail in town I've been on.
Okay. And actually, you know what? I'd ask you, I'd like to talk about some of the trails, and I would like to do that. But let's be totally honest. You're talking to a panel of people who haven't spent too much time out on the trails. So, you know what? Just take a minute, John, and speak to us and tell us why we should go out and enjoy the trails of Hopkinton. What's the experience like?
Well, it's exercise, it's fresh air. One thing I will say is when you go out, don't wear headphones. I get really annoyed when I see people walking on trails. I've even run into people up in when I was hiking in the White Mountains with headphones on. I just don't understand it. I was out this morning over in one of our system that's right near my neighborhood, and I was hearing frogs croaking and the woodpeckers going, and you don't get that with headphones. So it's relaxing. If you can look around, you've got nature all around you. In some places, you will see other people enjoying it. It is a relaxing thing. There is a thing I'll call it called forest bathing. I believe it's a Japanese concept of going out in the woods and letting nature cleanse you, cleanse your spirit, cleanse your head. I like going out by solo a lot because I wound up just having conversations in my head the whole time, and I wound up coming home mentally refreshed because I've sorted a lot of things out.
Yeah, and I think that Have you heard? I'm sure you've heard about. Is it called nature bathing now?
Same, yeah, forest bathing, nature bathing, same
Yeah.
idea.
There's a lot of really interesting stories about that, about ways that it'll affect you that you wouldn't even expect.
Absolutely.
Mm.
It's a good
All right,
thing.
I think I got a note from Tom that he's got something to say.
Yes,
Sure.
John. I have a couple questions for you. What's your favorite trail in town, and also what do you look for on the types of trails that you prefer? Is it the more scenic trails, or is it the more rough trails, the rough terrain? What kind of trails do you like the most?
Um, Bearing in mind that everybody wants a different kind of trail. Um, so I tend to go for the more rugged trails, things that have some interesting things. I like rocks. I like viewpoints. Um, Frankly, I tend to go off trail quite a bit. I have a bad habit of just wandering off into the woods and looking for rock formations, looking for old cellar holes. And I found a lot of cool things over the years. Here, I'll show you. You can find deer antlers every once in a while just lying on the ground out on those trails. So you can find those things. Other people want easier walks. I work with Marjorie Turner Holman. She's a local author who publishes books called Easy Walks in Massachusetts. She wants trails that are relatively smooth, that won't present a tripping hazard, no more than 2 miles long, that sort of thing. I was helping yesterday a woman in town who was looking for a place where she could take an off-road baby stroller. So I helped her. I suggested a couple places in town that she could go. Again, she's a little bit probably between the Easy Walks lady and me, but whatever you're looking for, it's honestly, there are more than 30 named trail systems in Hopkinton. You can find whatever you want around here.
And what are specific trails known for? Do they each actually? Have you been on the new one, the peppercorn one?
Yeah.
Okay, so do the trails have different? What'd you say, like personalities
Yeah.
or features to attract? Like what would you say about some of those?
Well, here, let me see if I can find my stuff. So because of the increased interest lately with the trails, I've been putting together a list of good starter trails for people, relatively not tough to walk on, but interesting. So people know about Center Trail. Hopkinton State Park has some great trails. They've got trails on both sides of Cedar Street, by the way. There are trails leading from behind the park headquarters. That's the building you pass that has the big Smoky Bear sign. That has great trails in there that hardly anybody ever goes on. And that's a really cool area. It's got some water features, some huge rocks in there. That's a nice trail. Fruit Street, people don't realize that Fruit Street, even though it's closed, and I do need to put in here that Parks and Rec is emphasizing that all of their parks and outdoor places are closed. They don't want anybody congregating, but you still can go on their trails. So there are trails at Fruit Street you can walk on. The Hughes property is a really nice beginning walk for people. There's a nice parking space right at 192 Hayden Row. Trying to think of some other ones. Whitehall Conservation. That's off Wood Street. That's a small area, and that's got a nice trail that goes along and ends right at Lake Whitehall at a nice overlook of the water. So those are the good starter ones. Those are probably my favorite is literally, and it's because it's right outside my neighborhood, is the Town Forest and Cameron Woods. That's more than 250 acres of open space. And I'm out there all the time, and I rarely ever run into anybody out there. That can be some tough walking in there. But again, neat rock formations, streams, and vernal pools, a little bit of everything in there. That's where I was hearing the frogs today.
Yes, yes. So you mentioned something really interesting. So when you were at Whitehall, I know I've been around there, and there's this. I don't know if it's a house or it was. We used to call it the old hotel. foundation that's there, where it's just a chimney and the foundation left. It's off near off of Pond Street.
Yep, I know that one.
Yeah. So do you remember that foundation there?
Yep, I know that one. That's an interesting thing. I'll try not to digress too much, but I tend to read a lot of old histories, and one of them was an old history of Lake Whitehall, and it mentioned that an Indian chief was buried on the shores of Lake Whitehall, and they were describing where he had been buried. And when I went out, I believe it's right where that chimney is. So
okay,
maybe because it's a haunted place, but that's a neat one. There's a trail around Whitehall that is 6 miles long. People don't realize that it's that long, and it can be a really tough walk, but it's well marked. It's all in blue markers. That's all state land. That's a cool one.
Okay. What are some? So you talk about how you go off trail. I don't know how much we want to recommend that. I don't know if I don't know if you have an unerring sense of direction, and the mere mortal should not attempt that.
No, I have apps.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, can you talk about like some of the interesting experience you've had? Maybe things you found, or creatures that you've seen, or stuff like that along the way.
Well, sure. Probably the one that comes most to mind is over in Upton State Forest. I kept finding two things. One was old cellar holes in the middle of the woods, nothing around them, no roads coming into them. Couldn't figure out what those were there. And I wound up working with the Friends of Upton State Forest to document those. And they've added them into their maps to document all the history of habitation in Upton State Forest. So those are fun, an old well holes, stone-lined wells, that sort of thing. You also find there was quarrying done in there. They would make millstones, and every once in a while you'll find a big stone millstone still sitting in the woods that was abandoned because it either broke or they couldn't get it out or something like that. So you find those. The other thing I found over in there is these posts with numbers on them, and there's an orienteering course set up in Upton State Forest. I had various stories on it over the years that it was set up by the state and they ran out of money and abandoned it. But lately I've come to believe that it was set up by private people who shouldn't really be doing that. But they're out there in the woods, and apparently there are 26 of them. I think I found half of them so far.
And what about animals? What kind of animals have you seen?
Animals have yet to run into a bear, thankfully. Deer are not uncommon. I'll be walking along and you'll hear a noise. One time I was walking with my dog just a couple of weeks ago, and she stopped and was sniffing at something, and while I was waiting for her, I looked up and there was a deer about 20 feet away from us, staring at us, sort of saying, you don't see me, I'm just sitting here quietly. And then she finally just figured it was better to leave, so she took off into the woods. But and then long ago, I was walking along, and a fisher showed up, and then another one, two fishers, and you rarely see a pair of fishers. They're very solitary. I'm watching them, and I'm like, you're a cool looking animal. And one of them went up a tree, and I'm watching him, and he's sort of looking at me, and I'm paying attention to him. And all of a sudden I stopped and said, where's the other one? And that was around the time of Jurassic Park and velociraptors. And I'm thinking, holy crap, he's coming up behind me. So I backed away and grabbed a stick.
John, I see a lot of people on the bike trail path that starts in Milford, goes into Hopkinton. You ever walked along there? Or what are your thoughts on that path?
Yeah, I like that. That's a completely different experience. You're walking on a road, not a trail. but I have ridden my bike on it. I've done rollerblades on that a couple of times. I have just walked it. Uh, it's another experience, but it's a great resource to have out there to get people out into the woods. One thing a lot of people may not know is when you're walking, and I'll say walking from Hopkinton end down toward downtown Milford, all that land on the left is full of trails. Um, they're maintained by the New England Mountain Bike Association, who actually own a piece of land in there, which is, they're the only mountain bike association in the world that owns land. And they were asked to sell it when the casinos were coming in. They refused to sell it. But the rest of it is like Holliston Town Forest, various other open space. But it's this massive, massive, wonderful trail system that I've walked on. I've taken a bike on. That is a really cool area. And it connects over to College Rock. And the Trails Club, College Rock was the very first place the Trails Club ever walked back in 2005. And we go back there every year now in October for an annual re-walk. And it does connect part of those trails. So I'll encourage people to come and join us on one of those walks.
Okay, Mike, space bar and talk.
So, John, how does everyone find out where these trails are and what they're like? There's several ways, I'm assuming. What are the best ways to find out?
It's a great question, Tom.
Of course it was. Did you expect anything less?
No. The simple answer is go to the Hopkinton Trails Club website. The whole purpose of that website is to pull together all of this information. So we have maps. We have my favorite one is one big map that shows every, I shouldn't say area because there are more new ones being added all the time, but most of the trail systems in town. You can click on each one and get a map there. The Hopkinton Area Land Trust just recently updated their website. They have maps in there, and if you go to their site on your phone, you can actually do a show me where I am thing on their trails. So that's good. But we've got links to obviously all the Hopkinton resources, but links to other towns nearby of all of their trail systems. So go there. You can sign up for our email list, subscribe to that on there. You can, we've got a Facebook page now. Like and follow that to keep up with our stuff. So those are the best ways to do it.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you. This half hour kind of flew by, and I believe you're sticking around as a guest for the next half hour. So stay tuned. Before we get to the next half hour, I'm going to ask Matt to turn his camera and his mic on and give us a quick little preview of other episodes we have coming up next week on the Hangout Hour.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. Well, we have a lot of programs coming up next week. Obviously, with 5 days, we have 10 half-hour blocks to get through. We have Lisa Jackson and Coach Simos talking. We have Evan Bishop and Carol Kavanaugh from the schools. Abby Rosenberg and Heather Bachman, Amy Beck and Matt Reardon, and then we have Mina Barath and also a little Geek Week program next week as well.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for giving us that little update. And at this point, Mike is going to be starting his half hour with, I believe, Barbara Kessler, who has now joined us. So, Mike, take it away.
Thanks, Jim, and welcome everybody for this half hour. Here, I am delightfully grateful to have local and one of our favorite musicians, Barbara Kessler. Barbara, welcome.
I think Barbara is muted.
Oh. Hello, Barbara.
Hi.
There she is.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Hey,
We're doing fantastic. There you are in your studio. Thank you for taking the time out this afternoon. The big question that everyone has, how are you hanging out there?
We're doing well. Bumping up. Having a good time. Just, cleaning out those drawers and cooking a lot and playing some games with the family, binge watching TV. and playing a lot of music, to be honest. So that's a good thing.
Well, I'm sure you're always playing music every chance you get, and I guess this must just give you a little bit more time to do that. So, just for the people that don't know you, Barbara, where do you come from?
Well, I'm originally from Long Island, New York, and went to school, Cornell University, graduated there, moved around, and then kind of moved into Boston area around the early 90s and started doing music full time at that time. So kind of a late bloomer with that in my life. And then I played, at that time, there was a lot of coffee houses. You know, we used to have a place here in Westboro called the Old Vienna Coffee House. I don't know if folks probably remember that. And those are some of my first gigs ever. And that's how I first heard about Hopkinton. It was right next door in Westboro. And that's how I met my husband, Phil, because he was running a couple of promotional events, contests, kind of battle of the bands for acoustic players called Acoustic Underground. And I entered those contests. And while I did not win first place, I call Phil my booby prize.
And I think I actually heard you call that quite a bit, but that's. But I'm sure you were first prize in his heart, so that's outstanding. So how did you and Phil get to Hopkinton?
Well, so we actually moved out from Boston to Framingham right before our first daughter Amelia was born, like mid 90s, and we did that because Phil is very smart and very handy, so he bought a 3-family in Framingham, and that's the only way we as musicians could afford to buy a house. So we still have that house, and then we kind of once our second one came along in 2001, we knew we were going to need some 2002, we're going to need some more space, and so we both loved Hopkinton. It was funny, I had a friend who had a house here, and he knew about it from just life where it had taken him. We loved the town, that it had so much green space. It had these lakes. We actually tried to buy a house on the end of Sandy Beach there on the lake, and that was not to be. So I found this place here on Hayden Rose Street, which happens to have this barn. It was pretty much like a garage for the former owners. And we saw it and we knew someday that could be a good music studio. So it took us a few years, about 4 or 5 years into living here before Phil finished the barn. So I don't know, folks can kind of see it. There's one of his drum sets. Here's this is on a stand because we've been teaching our lessons via Zoom and FaceTime. So we have the iPad on a stand. There's one of his other drum sets. There's, we got recording equipment upstairs. And so it ended up being a really good second choice for us, this house. Whoops. Now what did I do?
There you go. Well, that's outstanding. It was a great choice, too, because we wound up being neighbors. You moved right next door to us, and knowing what the old barn looked like and how you converted it, raising it up, was that 5-6 feet? And,
right now, yep.
And the way you finished off the inside, I've been there for many concerts, and the place is just gorgeous. And again, you're running your teaching out of there, and your own recording and so forth, which is awesome. So now with everything going on, you did mention you're doing it online. How's that working out?
So far, it's pretty good. I haven't lost any students, and we've been meeting via FaceTime and Zoom. Which is what we're doing now, which seems to have a more seamless connection. We don't cut each other out while we're playing at the same time. And you know what? In some ways, it's harder because, it's nice to just in real time be able to respond and react to what somebody's doing technically. But in other ways, it's been a nice focus. And I do teach a lot of school-age kids as my students, and I think they're used to working on screens at this point.
Yeah.
I think it's hard for us old people to adjust, but they're like, they're just right in there.
Yeah, so they do this all day, every day.
Exactly. Yeah. The technology is not an impediment, so right. They're focused almost more. And
sure.
I have my instrument in my hand all day, one instrument or the other, my ukulele, my guitar, or singing, and so it's been good. Yeah, I
That's
still have it
outstanding.
now. Yeah, I have some more time, little free.
Yeah. So all the kids home? Everyone away? Is everyone? All the kids at home?
Amelia is in Boston.
She's in Boston, so okay.
Yeah.
So now not only you are film musicians, your children as well.
Yeah, well, Amelia, Amelia is our oldest, and she goes by Amelia Ali. You can find her on Spotify. She's got millions of plays, hundreds of thousands of listeners, and yeah. You go on my Spotify, and there's like 1,000. I think that I have one song that's maybe like 13,000 plays, but it's nothing. It's just a whole new world, Mike.
That's the one when you put on Spotify 10 years ago when it started, right? Not the one she put on last week.
Well,
That's
Amelia
great.
has songs coming out all the time.
Constantly.
So, you froze. Hello,
Oh,
can you still hear me?
Yeah, you're still going. Am I still going?
Hello.
I thought I was still going.
Both. You guys are good.
All right, so I could hear you froze a little bit, but
okay.
there you are. Welcome back.
Can we expect any new Barbara Kessler songs soon?
Well, I have not been writing these last few years. The transition for me has gone from being a touring songwriter to being a stay-at-home songwriter, and still get my songs on TV shows now and again, which is kind of a cool thing. Usually it's background music, but I started teaching myself classical guitar, and I started auditioning for musical theater. So I feel like my creativity has gone more in the becoming a student as opposed to being a performer so much. And yeah, who knows what the next decade will bring now that we're in 2020. I guess you're never too old to write a new album.
Right. So now you mentioned how you met at these open mics and coffee houses. And you ran the open mics here a couple times in town.
Yeah.
We had the old ESL.
That's right. Yeah, I started it downtown when we didn't. HCA didn't exist, and the Interstage Left Theater Company had a small space on Main Street, and we started there, and then we branched out into what was Chow Time for a while, then became Bittersweet. And we did open mics there. And then when they opened up the HCA building here in town, the Hopkinton Center for the Arts, then we started it again. So it's called the First Friday Open Mic. And I no longer am the host. Jack Byrne is now the host, but it's
Jack
once
Byrne,
a month. Yeah, it's great. So there's a lot of people coming out to town who are getting introduced to the theater here, the space. And, it's always a good audience. People really appreciate having a place to go. That's all ages. To sing along or to just listen.
Right. So getting along with the ESL and HCA end of things, you're doing some acting.
Yes, I am. I've done some plays, some musical theater, and some non-musical plays, and it's been fun. Yeah. And do you know that we have a wonderful actor in town named Jerry Shea, who is
I know Jerry very well. Fantastic guy.
Fantastic. A former Broadway star turned TV star. He was just in the first season of City on the Hill.
Yep.
City on a Hill. And
well, only one season, obviously. I don't want to. No spoiler alerts.
No spoilers. But he's also teaching at the HCA, so I was just a part of one of his acting studio classes. So that's a great resource here, right here in Hopkinton. Who knew? So
it's incredible.
There's a lot to offer.
Yeah. It's always been incredible. We've known each other for a long time, and we've always said how incredible the talent that is in this town, how it's just coming out. And let's throw it back, I don't know, 10 or 12 years, Hopkinton Idol.
Yeah.
We watch these little kids grow into these big performers now. It's just amazing.
I know. Sasha, right?
Sasha Yachenko is now Sasha Sloan, recording everywhere, touring. Maggie Grabmeyer, all over the place, touring. It's incredible.
Fantastic.
These are 2 winners from our contest. I think you voted for all of them, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was delighted. I still see a lot of talented kids. You know, the kids. I have a couple of songwriters right now in my young students. One is in fifth grade, I think. Oh, I'm losing track. Another one is seventh grader. You know, they're young and they're trying their hand at songwriting, and they all love to perform. Most of them love to perform. It's tricky. I mean, I love to perform, but I also am an introvert, so it's a bit stressful. I'm trying to teach people not only about the instrument and how to play and how to sing, but also how to deal with that sort of nervousness that comes from being an artist. You know, you're putting yourself out there.
Sure.
It's not easy. You get anxious, and
Well, it can be tough because what is harder to do? Is it harder to play a room of 1,000 or a room of 5? You know, you're gonna get either or, especially when you're just starting.
Yeah.
And speaking about an audience of 4 or 5, there's 4 or 5 of us here now, plus people watching. Would you like to a song for us?
Yeah, I'd love to do a song. Yes, please. Thank
All
you
right.
for having me. And I'll do my song "Happy with You."
Fantastic. I love this song.
Aw, thank you. How's the audio? Does it sound okay?
Audio is awesome.
In a steel town on a gray day, in an apartment above the drugstore on the corner, and every payday we go blow it all down at the bar. And I would be happy here. There would be nothing better to do, 'cause there's nothing better than being happy with you. In the city, in a deep crowd, no view from our window, and 60-hour weeks sleep inside. And in summer, we will go visit friends who live close to the beach. Yeah, I would be happy. There would be nothing better to do, 'cause there's nothing better than being happy with you. In a cave on the side of a mountain, in an adobe in old Mexico, on the lawn in the heart of suburbia, kids and a dog and neighbors who'd know that I'd be so happy with you. Yeah. Oh, well, it's Hopkinton, and it's raining again. You're on the phone, and I'm singing my song. My mind's drifting, not complaining, but sometimes I forget what I've known all along, that I would be happy. Oh, I don't need nothing better to Oh, I would be happy with you.
Outstanding. Good job.
Thank you. Whew.
So John was John has a question.
Did we freeze?
I do. So Barbara, you're hanging in there with lessons and songwriting. But I'm assuming you have friends who are still gig musicians. How are they handling this days, and how can people support their favorite gig musicians now that there are no gigs?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Yes, I have so many friends. A lot of them are doing Facebook streaming concerts. I know Club Passim in Boston was doing a kind of a fundraiser concert. I think the best way to seek out and support your artists that you love is to go on their Facebook page or their Instagram and find out what their next thing is. A lot of them will have a tip jar or a Venmo account, some way that you can support them and actually just give them a tip for a cup of coffee or something. Because it's definitely a hard time for people who depend on leaving the house for their livelihood. But there's no shortage of music. I swear, if you go on any of these, you'll see a live. Just one of the people that I love, a songwriter named Rufus Wainwright. He's on Instagram every day doing what he calls quarantunes. So they're tunes in quarantine. He just sits there right in his robe at his piano. So it's a great opportunity to see an artist that you love, like in their own house on a computer screen. So it's a really nice thing to do. And thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, I've been following Mary Chapin Carpenter. She's been doing
from her kitchen. I follow her too. And
with
Sean
her dog.
Colvin.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, have you seen Sean Colvin has done some too?
No, that was good.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's I think that not only is it fun to see people in their own habitat, just in their own house, but it's a sense of like camaraderie that we're all just kind of stuck at home and doing the right thing by not being out there and potentially spreading something. So kind of good solidarity.
Chris, I forget how to pronounce his last name, Chris Thiele, who does a radio show called Live from Here. He's been challenging musicians that would normally be on his show to produce home videos called Live from Home. So if you do a hashtag Live from Home on YouTube, you'll find a ton of musicians, and each one of them then challenges two other musicians. So it's just blossoming like crazy.
Oh, I'll go check that out. Live from Home hashtag. Okay.
So Tom had a question for you.
Barbara, what's your favorite venue to play at?
Good question. Well, I have a sweet spot for the Hopkinton Common.
I knew that was going to come. And John Ritz was hoping you were going to say that too.
Oh, it's sweet. It's sweet because it's like the best of both worlds. There's always a great crowd, great, sound. There's always somebody there from HCAM making a recording of it. And it's like right down the street from my house. I literally could walk there. And it's all ages, so it's very sweet. But back in the day when I used to tour a lot, I loved Passim, Club Passim. I love a lot of the coffee houses here in New England that oftentimes take place at a Unitarian church, like the Homegrown Coffee House in Needham. And trying to think of where else I used to play a lot. Wellesley, Sherburne. Oh my goodness. Acton. Yeah. Lots of good places that I can't think of anymore right now. Of course, as Mike said, we do a lot of concerts right here, so that can't get any closer to home. And it's not always just me playing. Sometimes it'll be a band. My husband Phil's a drummer, so he plays in a number of different bands. And his old band from the days when I first met him have kind of been reconvening and playing cover gigs. We played at the HCA for New Year's, and I joined them. So we do a lot of great cover songs, from Prince to the Pretenders to Earth, Wind and Fire to Tom Petty. It's a lot of fun, and I get to play electric guitar and sing rock and roll. So
right, and you mentioned too when you mentioned the other bands, it's funny when you perform because I've been watching you perform for 20 years now or something, and it's just amazing that you'll go from solo to maybe an accompanist to a full band to your daughter's joining you up on stage to, I mean, you do so much. Is there any one that you prefer better? How you like to perform?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I used to only perform solo. And then I gradually, as I recorded albums that were more produced and had full arrangements on them, then I started touring with a band. And then I went back to solo again because it made the most pragmatic sense. So my husband would be home with the kids. I'd be out solo doing the show. And I think right now, while I feel most at home, just me and my guitar, I crave that connection on stage. It's just like when I do acting now. It's that what you create in the moment will never happen again. You may be reading the same lines in a play or singing the same song, playing the same arrangement, but that live connection of playing with other people and you don't know how it's going to go down each time is a new. It's like alchemy. It's just really great. So that's my favorite for now.
Right.
Playing with a band.
That's great. And if we survive this and we don't go into the zombie apocalypse, will we have any more Barn 81 concerts?
We will have barn concerts here. Yeah, we're planning one that is going to be an '80s tribute. And when I say '80s, I mean
right up my alley.
Yeah, all the synth stuff from the '80s, the early '80s, like down to the synthesizer sound, like totally recreated with all the harmonies and all the parts. So we've been working on it for a while. A couple of things have set the performance date back, and now this is the latest thing that's interrupted our plans. But that's the next one that's coming up. So hopefully October.
And we'll that'd be great. And I'm on the mailing list, so I know I'll get that. As you can bring back all the '80s synth. How about the '80s hair? Will the '80s hair be joining you?
I'm working on it. Shoulder pads for sure.
Gotta have shoulder pads.
Yeah.
That is outstanding. So, what has been pushed off due to everyone being socially distant? What has been pushed off the most that it really hurts you the most, emotionally or anything?
Visiting my parents. That's the hardest thing. They are elderly, obviously, and my dad is 92 now, and my mom is 87, and my mom is not in that great health, so my dad is her whole, her sole caretaker, and so we usually, my siblings, I have one that lives in New York, and the other two live up here with me, and we've been trading off who goes there and spends some time and helps out, and none of us can do that right now. So we're just, my sister who lives there is taking care of getting them their groceries and making sure they have what they need from the stores. But I miss them terribly and I worry about them. So that's, to be honest, that's really the only hardship. I have really enjoyed having a little downtime. It feels like a little pause on the craziness of life. I don't know if anybody else feels that way. Just even, I have two seniors. My niece lives with us now. And so I have my daughter, Elena, who's a senior at high school. And so is Isabella. And, there's a lot of requirements, a lot of getting up every day, having to show up and, appointments and things. So this is pause on all our to-do list in that way. We still have work to do, but it feels less harried and less crazy. A lot of more family time. We've been playing games tonight, just, it's a little bit of sweetness.
Sure. And how is it being at home with a senior who is supposed to be the greatest year of her life right now, being stuck in the house with you?
It's a little crazy. I know. We're just keeping fingers crossed that, graduation doesn't get totally waylaid and senior dinner. There's that. There's other events that happen. So yeah, I mean, so far we're keeping it all in perspective, but yeah, I think at the end of the day, this will be a lot more memorable a senior year than the alternative. For what it's worth.
Yeah, I think those people that have to do one better all the time, I'm going to say the class of 2020 has us all beat.
I know. I knew it would be. It just sounds so, 2020. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Had to make
Yeah.
itself.
All right. Well, listen, we only have about 5-6 minutes left. How about one more song from you?
Oh,
You
I'd
got one
love
more
to.
in you?
Yeah, I got another. Let's do the.
Fantastic.
I'm going to do the one that I wrote, inspired by Hopkinton. And
There you go. What a
do you remember this one? It's called Little House. I usually have my daughters sing,
yes.
but they're not here, so you just have to have me.
Right.
Little house on a hill, but down a dirt road in a town, by the lake, not far from the sea, you and me. Inside home is all I'm really dreaming of. Stay with me, lay your worry down, my love. We're home. Let the rain fall down outside. Let the wind blow, forget the storm. Leave the dishes and curl up here beside me. Home is all I really dream of. Stay with me. Lay your worry down, my love. We're home. Four walls, a roof, and a door, windows and floor to our garden. All we ever need is you with me and me with you. Two home is all I'm really dreaming of. Stay with me, lay your worry down, my love. We're home. It's all I'm really dreaming of. Stay with me, lay your worry down, my love. We're home. Little house on a hill.
Fantastic.
Hey, thank you guys. Thanks for making my day. I really appreciate the invitation.
Thank you,
And thanks-
Barbara. Thank you. You made our day. You made the whole show. That was wonderful.
Aw. Thanks for all you do, keeping the community informed and everything. Stay safe and
Thank you.
healthy.
Thank you. Thanks again, Barbara. And I'd like to thank everybody else, Jim for and John Ritz for first half hour. And I'd like to have everyone come back on Monday at 2:00 when we'll have, I believe, Jim Cousins will be hosting an hour with Evan Bishop, the high school principal, and school superintendent Cal Kavanaugh. So from everyone here at HCAM, Barbara, again, thanks for hanging out with all of us. And we'll see everybody next week. Thank you.